I am Riley, 31 years old, and if you were to look at my life on paper, you might see a portrait of steady responsibility, perhaps even quiet strength. For most of my adult years, I have been the one everyone depends on, the invisible net catching each fall, the afterthought when applause is handed out. What people rarely saw, though, was the weight I carried behind my careful composure. Our family's story is full of small slights and bigger wounds, but I suppose every family has its own way of letting you know who matters most. This is not a story about being a victim, though. It is a story of lines drawn in the sand and what happens when the tide turns. My earliest memories are of living in the shadow of Madeline. She is older by 2 years, and from childhood she was the star performer in every scene. Teachers adored her, neighbors raved about her cleverness, and my parents, well, their pride in her was as obvious as the summer Sunday. Look at Madeline's grades, they would beam at family gatherings. When Madeline made the honor roll in 8th grade, there was a dinner at her favorite restaurant and a new bicycle with a pink ribbon on the handlebars. When I did the same a year later, I was told simply, "That's what we expect from you, Riley." Sometimes it is not what is said, but the silence that tells you your place in the world. This pattern followed us into adulthood. Madeline was always the one who could do no wrong, no matter how stormy her life became. She was quick to leap into grand plans and even quicker to leap out of them, always certain someone would tidy up behind her. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. My mother promised a party, cupcakes, and games with friends. The morning arrived, but so did Madeline's last-minute ballet audition. "We'll celebrate next weekend," my mother said, barely glancing at the disappointment on my face. The party was quietly canceled. No cake, no photos, no memory, except for a silence I learned to swallow. Over the years, this became a motif in our home. College funds appeared for Madeline, yet I was gently told that independence builds character as I signed for my own student loans. I watched Madeline cycle through a series of ill-fated jobs and tumultuous relationships, yet she remained the family's golden child. I, meanwhile, built my life piece by piece, rarely praised, often unseen, but always reliable. Things changed abruptly 5 years ago. Our parents died in an accident, leaving behind a spacious apartment in Midtown Manhattan and a trust fund meant to secure the future for Madeline's 3 young daughters, Ava, Sophie, and Charlotte. With no one else to step in, I became their guardian by necessity, not by choice, though I grew to love them as fiercely as if they were my own. Madeline, meanwhile, slipped further into old habits. At first, she claimed she needed time to get on her feet. That time stretched from weeks to months, then years. Each promise she made to her children was soon replaced with a new boyfriend, a fleeting job, or a shopping trip that left the credit cards burning. I adjusted my life to fit the needs of 3 little girls. Mornings started before dawn, the kitchen filled with the scent of oatmeal and cinnamon, the soft voices of sleepy children blending with the city's hum outside. I packed lunches, braided hair, helped with school projects, and navigated parent-teacher conferences, all while keeping up with a demanding job at a small legal firm. My own ambitions faded into the background. Even my closest relationship fell apart under the strain, my partner Bailey finally admitting I can't be with someone who is always putting themselves last. Sometimes I wondered if they were right. Despite all this, I kept helping Madeline. When she rang at midnight, desperate for a ride from yet another club or needing a loan to cover just 1 month's rent, I said yes. I transferred $12,000 to her account when she nearly lost her apartment, and no one ever suspected I was the reason the eviction notice vanished from her door. When rumors started about missing money from the girls' trust fund, I dug into the statements myself, quietly fixing what Madeline had nearly ruined. I disguised these actions with a smile, never mentioning the cost to anyone, not even the girls. Looking back, I suppose I should have seen it coming. The family had long been used to me as their silent problem solver, the person who made troubles disappear with as little drama as possible. But as my own resources, emotional and financial, began to wear thin, a sense of unease settled in. I noticed the change in Madeline's tone. Her gratitude soured into entitlement, her apologies became fewer, her demands louder. If you have ever been the reliable one that nobody appreciates, you will understand how exhausting it is to keep giving without ever being truly seen. Then came Ava's graduation day, a day meant to celebrate achievement and new beginnings. The whole family gathered for photos in the bright June sunlight, laughter and chatter swirling around us. Madeline, dressed in a new designer dress, called for everyone's attention. "I have an announcement," she declared, her voice ringing through the courtyard. "I have decided to move to Florida and finally pursue my dream business." Riley will be taking care of the girls from now on." The words fell like stones in a pond, rippling outwards, stirring confusion and whispers. Some people clapped, others offered awkward congratulations. I stood silent, the familiar heat of humiliation rising in my cheeks. What I did not know then was that this moment was only the beginning of the betrayal that would follow and of the quiet strength that I would soon discover within myself. If you have ever watched the world shift beneath your feet, stick around. This is a story about finding your own voice even when others would rather you stay silent. If you have ever known the heavy silence of a home that is full but never quite feels like yours, then you might understand what those years became for me. After that summer's graduation, the day Madeline announced her departure, as if tossing off an old coat, the girls' lives shifted into my hands as gently and as irreversibly as autumn leaves falling to earth. 5 years earlier, after the sudden loss of our parents, I remember sitting at a polished conference table in a lawyer's office, the air so thick with the scent of paper and ink that I could hardly breathe. The will was clear: the Midtown apartment and what remained of the family's savings were to be managed for the benefit of Madeline's daughters, on the condition that whoever served as their guardian provided a stable home. I signed the papers with a trembling hand, Madeline's signature following mine in a flourish, though her gaze was already on her phone texting someone else about dinner plans. I knew even then that what was supposed to be a partnership would become a burden I carried alone. My days became a series of small sacrifices, each one stacking neatly atop the next. I learned to stretch time and money in ways that would have impressed the most seasoned magician. I woke early to make breakfast, sometimes pancakes shaped like stars, sometimes just toast and jam if the bills had piled up that month. I walked the girls to school holding Charlotte's tiny hand as Ava and Sophie skipped ahead, their backpacks bouncing. I worked long hours at the legal firm, racing the clock to finish briefs before dashing back for afternoon pickup, my own lunch eaten hurriedly at my desk, if at all. There were times I thought about asking for help. I would watch parents at school events laughing together in clusters and wonder what it felt like to belong somewhere without condition. Yet each time Madeline called, it was never to offer a helping hand. Instead, it was always another crisis, another job lost, another friend who had turned out to be a thief, another boyfriend who was the one until he wasn't. Sometimes she would leave the girls with me for what she said would be a weekend, only to vanish for weeks at a time. I learned to keep a spare set of their clothes in my car, just in case. My own world narrowed. I stopped dating, even though Bailey tried to be patient. "I love you, but you can't save everyone. Riley," they said softly one night when I came home late from an emergency parent-teacher conference. I watched our relationship wither under the constant demands of my new life, and when it ended, I felt both the sting of loss and a strange sense of relief. There was one less person I was letting down. Money, too, became a source of worry I never voiced aloud. The trust fund for the girls was meant for education and essentials, but Madeline's withdrawals often for things far from essential meant. I covered school fees, medical bills, even birthday presents from my own salary. I refinanced the apartment once, then twice quietly, using the equity to fill the gaps. I remember one cold January night lying awake and staring at the ceiling, calculating how many more months I could keep this all afloat before something gave way. There were small joys, though, that made the sacrifices bearable. The girls grew up with laughter in their eyes, not yet old enough to see how hard I worked to keep the world safe for them. We built our own traditions: movie nights with popcorn, picnics, and Central Park evenings spent reading stories by the fire. Sometimes I would find little notes tucked into my bag. "Thank you, Aunt Riley. I love you." Those words were worth more to me than all the applause Madeline had ever gathered. Still, the world outside our apartment seemed intent on reminding me of my place. Family gatherings were uncomfortable affairs. Madeline would sweep in late, regaling everyone with tales of her adventures, while I sat quietly with the girls answering polite questions about their schooling. No one ever asked how I was. If you've ever been the one left holding the pieces, you'll know the ache that grows when your efforts are invisible. Over time, my patience began to thin. Madeline's carelessness grew bolder. She once disappeared for nearly a month, unreachable by phone, and when she returned, she was angry that I had interfered by contacting the school about the girls' absence. I tried reasoning, pleading, even threatening to go to court for full guardianship, but Madeline laughed in my face. "You think the family would ever take your side over mine?" she scoffed, tossing her hair back as if I were nothing more than the hired help. Looking back, the warning signs were all there. A growing sense that I was being set up as both scapegoat and savior, a role I had never asked for. And yet I kept going, driven by love, duty, or perhaps the stubborn hope that things might someday change. If you've ever felt like you were walking a tightrope over an empty pit, you'll understand why I kept moving forward step by trembling step. What I did not know was that all my sacrifices, all the quiet choices I had made were about to come crashing down in the most public, humiliating way possible. You would think after years of quietly cleaning up Madeline's messes, I would be immune to surprises. But betrayal has a way of stinging most when it is performed for an audience. Sometimes the hardest lessons in life are taught not in the privacy of our own minds, but on the bright stage of public opinion. It started quietly, a series of small, strange glances from extended family members at Sunday dinner, whispers just out of earshot. The way even my closest cousin Danielle would hesitate before asking me to pass the salad. I brushed it off as nerves or the natural awkwardness that comes from our patchwork family. Then the group chat began to buzz. The girls' graduation had barely faded into memory when a message marked urgent flashed across my phone. It was a screenshot forwarded by a distant relative from the family's group chat. There in black and white was a string of messages, Madeline's words, raw and damning, shared for all to see. She acts like she owns the place, Madeline had written. Riley's just living off what our parents left. She's only keeping the girls because she wants the apartment and the money. If I had my way, she'd be out on the street. I remember reading those words in the middle of the night, the city's noise muffled by my closed window, my heart pounding with a sense of exposure I hadn't felt since childhood. It is a strange pain realizing that the story you thought you were living has become someone else's cautionary tale. The messages did not end there. Another leak, this time a video shared by Madeline herself where she sat in the midtown living room, her hair perfectly styled, her lips painted a glossy red. "I'm just so tired of being taken advantage of," she lamented to the camera, playing the part of the wounded mother. "I do everything I can, but Riley wants control of everything, the money, the kids, even my own life. I just hope people see her for who she really is." The video spread like wildfire, first among relatives, then to mutual friends, and finally outwards into our broader social circle. At the next family event, a birthday party for Sophie, I was met with thin smiles and cold shoulders. One aunt muttered to her husband, "Is that the one who took over the trust fund?" I felt as though I had stepped onto a stage I never auditioned for, each step measured and watched. For the girls, the whispers trickled down as well. Ava came home from school in tears after a friend's parent told her, "Maybe you'll get to move in with your real mom soon." Even the teachers, normally so warm, seemed suddenly hesitant. There is a loneliness in being misjudged, a feeling as sharp and cold as glass. But humiliation was only the beginning. One evening, as I was organizing receipts for the apartment's monthly bills, I noticed irregularities in the trust fund statements. Withdrawals marked for education expenses that didn't match tuition payments, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. My heart sank with each new line. I began gathering documents, each one a piece of a puzzle I was no longer willing to ignore. A few days later, I returned home to find the building's doorman, a kind older gentleman named Miguel, waiting with a USB drive. "Miss Riley, you should see this," he said, his eyes apologetic. "Some of the staff have noticed things." On that drive was surveillance footage from the lobby. A grainy video time-stamped late at night showing Madeline leading unfamiliar men into the building, sometimes leaving her daughters asleep upstairs for hours. Sometimes she wouldn't return until sunrise. In one particularly damning clip, she could be seen forging my signature on a stack of trust fund withdrawal forms. The weight of what I held was almost too much to bear. Not only was Madeline lying about me to anyone who would listen, she was breaking the law, endangering her children, and risking everything my parents had left for the girls. I sat in my bedroom that night, the city's glow casting long shadows across the ceiling, and realized with a clarity that hurt I could no longer keep the peace at my own expense. Yet, even with the evidence in my hands, I hesitated. Years of conditioning had taught me that silence was safer than confrontation, that it was better to endure quietly than to make a scene. But as I listened to the girls' gentle breathing down the hall, I knew I owed them more than quiet endurance. If I did nothing, I was complicit in Madeline's destruction. What I did not know was that these revelations were only the beginning. The public humiliation had stripped away any remaining illusions. Now came the part where I had to choose: continue playing the role of silent guardian, or finally for once stand up and fight for the truth. If you've ever been pushed to your breaking point, you know that sometimes the hardest part isn't what others do to you, it's deciding when you've had enough. If you have ever spent your life trying to keep the peace, you will know that the decision to finally take a stand can be as terrifying as it is liberating. For years I believed that silence was safety, that to confront the ones we love, even when they hurt us, was a kind of betrayal. But after that storm of public humiliation, the bruises on my heart no longer felt like a sign of strength, they felt like shackles. The day I gathered my evidence, I moved through the apartment as if in a dream. The girls were at school, the city outside, oblivious to the turning of the tide in our small corner of the world. I lined up the trust fund statements, the forged forms, the surveillance footage, and a file of messages Madeline had sent while pretending to be me. Every detail, every small theft, every careless risk, it was all there laid bare under the cold light of day. I met with my attorney, Mr. Bernstein, a soft-spoken man with a gentle manner but a mind sharp as a razor. He listened without interruption as I explained the story, the years of sacrifice, the accusations, the fraud, the girls left alone, while Madeline chased one thrill after another. He glanced at the mountain of documents, nodding slowly. "Riley," he said at last, "there are times when keeping quiet serves no one, least of all those children. You have more than enough evidence. Are you ready to move forward?" I paused, feeling the weight of the decision, then nodded. "Yes, it's time." The legal process was a maze of paperwork and patience, but nothing prepared me for the family's reaction once the news broke. Madeline was served with a restraining order and notified of the petition to remove her access to the girls' trust fund. The next family gathering was not a birthday or holiday, but a courtroom, the kind with wood-paneled walls and old fluorescent lights that make everyone look tired. Madeline arrived in full performance mode, wearing pearls and a tailored dress, eyes flashing with fury and indignation. She did not glance my way. Instead, she swept into the room, flanked by her own lawyer and a small crowd of family supporters, many of whom not so long ago had sent me their own private doubts about her fitness. Now they sat behind her, arms folded, faces tight. The hearing was grueling. Madeline's attorney painted her as a loving, if imperfect mother just struggling to reclaim her life. They suggested I was power-hungry, determined to take what never belonged to me. "This apartment was never yours," Riley, Madeline said from the witness stand, her voice dripping with venom. "You're just the babysitter who got lucky." But the evidence once revealed spoke for itself. Video after video, bank statement after forged signature, a picture emerged that no performance could erase. The judge, a stern woman with kind eyes, listened quietly before speaking. "In all my years, I have rarely seen such clear documentation," she said, her tone even. "Madeline, you endangered your children and defrauded the very trust meant to protect them. Riley, you have acted as a guardian not only in name but in spirit. Effective immediately, all rights to the trust and custody are yours alone. Any attempt at interference will result in further sanctions." There was a silence in the room so deep it felt like the world holding its breath. Madeline's face drained of color. She rose from her chair, swaying slightly. An officer stepped forward quietly but firmly, asking her to leave. The image of Madeline, so often the center of attention, being quietly led out before friends and family, is one that will never leave me. Some of the family averted their eyes. Others whispered. A few reached for their phones, unable to resist recording the scene. It spread quickly. Soon, even acquaintances I had not seen in years were sending me sympathetic messages. The humiliation was public, as swift as it was complete. Afterward, I left the courthouse with the girls' hands in mine. The sky was gray, heavy with the promise of rain, but for the first time in years, I felt lighter. That night, after tucking Ava, Sophie, and Charlotte into bed, I stood by the window and let myself breathe in the quiet. I had not wanted a war, but I had found a kind of peace I'd forgotten was possible, the peace of finally choosing myself and the truth over the comfort of old lies. If you have ever wondered when it is time to stand up for what is right, let me tell you, it is when you realize the cost of silence is your own soul. But even then, the story was not yet over. The world has a way of testing us even after victory. The aftermath, what happened to Madeline, the family, and the new life we built, was still waiting just around the next corner. Victory, if you have ever known it in the wake of conflict, is rarely as clean or triumphant as the world imagines. The days following the courtroom decision felt both surreal and exhausting. There is a certain silence that settles after the storm, a hush filled not with peace but with the uneasy awareness that the whole world is watching to see what you will do next. Within hours of Madeline's public removal from the courtroom, video clips began to circulate across the family's social circles. First, it was whispers, an aunt sending a shaky phone recording to a cousin and neighbor sharing what she had seen with a book club. Then, as happens in this age, it spilled onto the internet. Mother escorted from trust fund hearing read one post. Another showed a freeze frame of Madeline's tear-streaked face with comments ranging from cruel to sympathetic. The family group chat, once a stream of recipes and holiday plans, now crackled with speculation and blame. Some relatives reached out privately offering apologies they never would have spoken aloud before. I had no idea how bad things were. Riley wrote one uncle, though I remembered his silence well enough. A few asked for details, curious about the size of the trust fund or the fate of the Midtown apartment. One cousin even inquired, only half joking, if I was hiring a new housekeeper now that I owned everything. I learned quickly that people are often most interested in your story when it makes good gossip. For the girls, the fallout was gentler. Children are resilient, but they are not blind. Ava, now a teenager, asked me directly if she would ever see her mother again. I told her the truth as gently as I could, that Madeline could visit, but only under supervision, and only if she fulfilled the judge's requirements. Sophie and Charlotte watched my face, searching for clues, but all I could offer was the assurance that I was not leaving. For the first time, our home felt like a place where they could rest, not just a stopgap between crises. Madeline's own fate unfolded in fits and starts. She spent several weeks posting cryptic messages, online photos of palm trees, motivational quotes about rising from the ashes. Some family friends rallied behind her, convinced that she was the victim of a jealous sibling's plot. Others distanced themselves, unwilling to be pulled into her orbit of drama. Over time, her circle grew smaller, her calls fewer. The apartment she once visited for parties and borrowed luxury quietly faded from her reach. The Midtown community too seemed to shift around me. Neighbors who had never spoken to me before stopped in the hall to offer quiet congratulations or ask how the girls were settling in. At Ava's next school event, a few parents who had once kept their distance now included me in their conversations. I found myself invited to join a local volunteer board, asked to contribute advice on family legal matters, a small but steady reminder that respect once earned through hardship lingers longer than any scandal. Yet, as the initial shock wore off, I was left alone with a sense of emptiness. I wandered through the apartment late at night, touching the walls, remembering each argument, each small joy, each sacrifice. The echoes of old battles did not fade easily. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, I received a message from Madeline herself. It was short. "I hope you're happy. This was never your life to begin with." I stared at the words for a long while, unsure if I felt triumph or sorrow. Maybe both. The truth is, the hardest part of surviving betrayal is not the pain of what was done to you, but the realization that some wounds will never be healed by an apology or even by justice. But I also knew the shame that Madeline tried to heap on me had not stuck. In the end, the public saw through the performance, and so did I. At the next family gathering, a Thanksgiving dinner organized by my cousin Danielle, there was an unfamiliar hush when I entered the room. No one said anything at first, but then someone started clapping. Others joined in. I will never forget that moment. Not because I wanted applause, but because for the first time I did not feel like an outsider in my own story. I spoke softly, but clearly to the family gathered there. Family isn't just the people who share your blood, it's the ones who stand with you when the world turns upside down. If you have ever been left behind, know this: you can build your own family out of love, loyalty, and courage, and no one can take that from you. The video of that moment made its way online too, though I did not mind. Sometimes what we survive is less important than how we survive it. And as autumn deepened over New York, I knew that despite all the loss, the shame, and the public spectacle, I had come through with my dignity and with the girls safe beside me. But this was not the end. A new life was just beginning, shaped not by fear or obligation, but by the quiet power of choice. 6 months have passed since that final courtroom scene, and life in the Midtown apartment has changed in ways that once felt impossible. In the beginning, I expected only a quiet kind of survival, days stitched together by routine, a steady heartbeat of duty and relief. What I did not expect was joy. The absence of constant crisis left a space I had not known was missing, a space that over time filled with something softer, stronger. The girls settled quickly into the new reality. Ava, once wary and withdrawn, found her stride in high school debate and art club, painting canvases that now hang along our hallway. Sophie took up piano, her music filling the apartment each afternoon, a gentle soundtrack to the life we were building. Charlotte, the youngest, blossomed into a whirlwind of curiosity, bringing home library books and wild stories from her first year in middle school. Their laughter, once tentative and uncertain, is now the pulse of our home. For myself, I rediscovered simple pleasures I had almost forgotten. I began each morning with a quiet cup of tea by the kitchen window, watching sunlight spill across the skyline. I repainted the living room, a soft blue, and hung new curtains, my choices not dictated by anyone else's taste. Friends old and new started gathering at our table for Friday dinners. We built new traditions: movie nights with homemade popcorn, lazy Sundays in Central Park, an annual holiday cookie bake with enough flour on the floor to make anyone laugh. The physical space around us became a reflection of the freedom we had won. I cleared out old belongings, donated what no longer served us, and filled the apartment with light and color. Where once there had been the anxious hush of waiting for the next emergency, there was now the contented noise of daily life. I even started a small garden on the balcony, herbs and wildflowers, a reminder that growth is possible anywhere, even high above city streets. Professionally, the shift was equally profound. No longer weighed down by secrecy or constant worry, I was able to return to my legal work with new clarity. My firm recognized my dedication, offering me a promotion and a flexible schedule that allowed me to be present for the girls. I began volunteering with a local nonprofit that helped families in crisis, offering not just legal advice but also the reassurance that comes from having walked through fire and survived. That work became a calling, a way to transform what I had endured into something that might ease another's burden. As for Madeline, her absence was a shadow that slowly faded from our daily lives. In the early weeks, she tried to regain her footing: emails demanding updates, social media posts painting herself as the wronged party. But the terms of the court order were clear: no contact without fulfilling every legal condition, including proof of counseling and financial stability. When she did reach out, the messages were brittle, full of old grievances and demands. The girls, when given the choice, chose silence. Over time, Madeline's presence in our story grew distant, no longer a looming threat, but a lesson in what happens when love is confused with entitlement. Our extended family adjusted too. Some apologized, a few drifted away, but most quietly accepted the new reality. At holidays, the tension that once clouded every gathering was replaced by cautious hope. It takes time, I've learned, for wounds to heal and trust to be rebuilt. But I saw it in small moments: an aunt offering to help with school projects, a cousin sharing a meal with us on a rainy evening. We were in the end still family, even if the shape of it had changed. Perhaps the greatest gift of those months was the realization that chosen family is just as real, just as vital as the family you are born into. Our circle grew to include friends, mentors, neighbors, people who showed up not out of obligation but out of genuine care. I watched the girls flourish under the attention of teachers, coaches, and friends' parents, all of whom became part of the web that held us up. There is a strength I've come to believe in allowing yourself to be supported, to ask for help, to trust that you are worthy of it. And as the seasons shifted, autumn leaves giving way to winter snow, then the first green buds of spring, I found myself reflecting often on the lesson of these years. It is easy to believe that family is a matter of blood and history, of shared faces in old photographs. But real family is built every day in the choices we make to show up, to forgive, to start again. It is built in the courage to set boundaries, to walk away from those who would harm us even when they share our name. To anyone listening, perhaps sitting alone with memories of a difficult childhood or struggling to break free from old patterns, I want you to know: you are not alone. Your value is not measured by how much you endure, but by the love you allow into your life. You can build something new even from the rubble of old betrayals. The world will tell you that you owe loyalty to those who hurt you. I am here to tell you that your first loyalty must be to yourself and to those who treat you with respect. If you have ever had to redefine your idea of family, or if you are still searching for your own place in the world, I would love to hear your story in the comments. Tell me, what does family mean to you? How have you found strength even when the world turned its back? If my journey has shown me anything, it is that we are stronger than we think, and that sometimes the greatest revenge is not in winning the Sovens old battles, but in living well with dignity, kindness, and hope for what comes next. Tonight, as I tuck the girls into bed and listen to the gentle rhythm of the city outside our window, I feel a peace that once seemed impossible. The future is still uncertain, but it is ours. and that after everything is enough.